Nick, how you doing today, brother?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on today.
Nick, you got all these helmets behind you. You didn't tell me where you're based.
So we're in Carlsbad, California, just north of San Diego. We're about 2 minutes from the water, and some people be like, "What are you doing opening a hard goods company in California?" We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So, Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you have all these helmets sitting around you?
Sure. No, so I grew up in the Midwest, um, only child, great parents. Blessed from that perspective. Grew up in a small town called Racine, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was an independent business person with some Hallmark stores, owned a Dairy Queen. My dad
Interesting.
had three master's degrees, which he got late in life as a medical examiner. And I went to a small school, University of Wisconsin Whitewater,
Mm-hmm.
played a little D3 football there. And
That's a
then
that's a high profile D3 school, though. Let's not.
it is.
I know because we got Mount Union here, so isn't it always like a proverbial like you guys versus Mount Union sort of thing?
They're always, those two teams are always in the championship hunt for D3. And, my size and talent level, weren't at the level where I was going to go much beyond that. But I learned a lot playing. Um, and football was just a huge part of my life and growing up and
Mm-hmm.
being Green Bay Packer fan. And my parents, were huge Packer fans. And by the time I was aware of what the hell was going on in terms of football, the Packers had gone from being champions to like bottom feeder. So until Brett Favre showed up, it was a tragedy. But I worked at the Xerox Corporation, then I worked for Bain Capital, involved with a big acquisition, moved out to San Diego. Concurrent to that, I started to race automobiles professionally. And I had a short stint at the Milwaukee Express trying to play football. And I realized suddenly that I was probably safer on the auto race track than on the football field while still trying to work a regular job. And once I moved to San Diego,
Can I stop you? Was that indoor football or is that
it was outdoor. It was right
okay?
before the Mustangs, which were the arena team. And, it was one of these semi-pro teams where the health insurance was $50 and you got paid $50 a game.
Yeah.
And, I would have played, but I wasn't going to go anywhere. And I'd show up to work the next day and I was just battered.
Yeah.
So
there was no Kurt Warner moment for you where you're playing arena ball and you get a call from the NFL like, "Hey, we need a quarterback."
No. My talent now related to football, at least on field, is in a LC 35 in Carlsbad. Here we have a league with about 150 players in it, ranging from 35-year-old players that played in the NFL to a guy like Jeff Garcia to people that never played football before that are in their 60s, and they're all mixed together. It's fantastic. We have a lot of fun. But
Is this tackle?
No.
Okay,
This is
because
it's
you probably know this, but there are like over 35, over 40-year-old tackle leagues, and
absolutely.
those just look insane to me because I played soccer in college and I used to actually referee like over 30, over 40, over 50 soccer. And sometimes those were like the nastiest games. These like over 40-year-old guys are like getting into fist fights on the soccer field and like screaming at each other. One's a lawyer, one's like a surgeon. You're like, what are you guys doing? But football is a whole other thing where it's just inherently just far more dangerous, whether that be knees, ankles, or head. So that's
100%.
crazy.
The injuries we most likely see are hamstring, calf muscle, and then the Oakley sunglass that cuts somebody's face when they dive for the ball. Every once in a while, have an Achilles, but it's great fun, and it helped me get immersed out here. I mean, I moved here in 93, 94, and I'm neck deep in my work. I wasn't married yet at the time, didn't have any kids. And I was busy and I was doing the car race gig. So I'm traveling all around North America. I raced in the Pirelli World Challenge. I started out SCCA amateur racing, got into Pirelli World Challenge, IMSA, ran a couple of races in other series, raced for Honda, BMW, Aston Martin, variety of other marques. And it was a great career. And that was really the basis of how this started. But I started a marketing company in 99 and we struggled early. We were selling products online early when online sales just started to pick up energy. But we were selling on TV. We had a book called Debt Cures, Top 100 Books of the Century. We hired Kevin Trudeau to be a front man, saved all the pennies out of the couch. We paid him 150 grand to come and shoot an infomercial. And it was Debt Cures, the solutions they don't want you to know about. And we sold 3 or 4 million books. Then we had a book called Free Money. We sold a couple million of those. We did a Navy SEAL coin collection, a variety of other things. And my life was busy with that. I was married. I had 2 kids. I had gone back and got my master's. I was racing full time. I went to the San Diego Sheriff Academy for search and rescue. And, I was almost too busy.
Yeah, hold on. I was about to say you went from Xerox to Bain Capital. So what? I mean, Bain Capital. I know you kind of just flipped it very quick, but an enormous private equity company there. Then you said you're playing football, racing cars, and then you just said infomercial, sold 3 million books. Like, you gotta slow down for me a little bit here.
Sure.
So take me back to like at least like Xerox and Bain. Like, what did you learn through those experiences that kind of led you into this entrepreneurial path?
When I graduated from college, the economy was rough. It was 1990, May of 1990, my job options, and I was a decent student. I had a marketing degree. My options were Georgia Pacific, selling building materials, going into the Marine Corps, or working for Xerox. And Xerox was almost like trading places, where they hired one pedigree guy that didn't drink, didn't swear. He was a 4.2, GPA. And then there was me that barely squeaked out of the business school. And the training, though, at Xerox, and that's the reason that I went there, was unbelievable. They had just won the Malcolm Baldrige Award for Quality. They'd send you to Leesburg, Virginia, and it was, organizational training, sales training, finance, et cetera, et cetera. It was almost like going for your master's degree. And I was selling printing systems. And at the time, I made decent money, and I was starting my race career. But I quickly realized that I probably wasn't designed to work at a large corporation.
Interesting. So how did you end up at Bain Capital? What was that like? And how old were you? Because that was probably kind of a fun, wild ride.
It was a fun ride. I had a couple of stop-offs between Xerox, and there was a telecom company called Executone Business Solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, I had applied for a job there as a manager and gotten started there. Well, concurrent to that, they were being purchased by Bain. And they sold like digital and hybrid PBXs. And again, something I wasn't that passionate about. But the position was the right position. And when Bain came in, basically they said, hey, we need someone to go out on the West Coast and clean some of these offices up. So I got drafted, and I look like a rock star, right? You show up at a place that's being managed poorly, and all you have to do is be one step above the person that was there prior. And I had a lot to learn about myself, about managing people.
How old are you? Because you're ostensibly coming into these companies and you're telling them, you guys don't know what you're doing. Let me come in and fix this thing. And you're like the new guy on the block, like what, 24, 26, 28?
I was like 26 years old. You're right. Yeah. And you bring up a good point, is especially in that time in the 90s, young people were I was almost looked down upon as I came in there. And you were thinning the herd in terms of people. You're having to make decisions. You were building an org chart. The people that were there, you had to soothe them, motivate them, gap fill, and all the budgeting associated with that. So, it was stressful, but I learned a lot about people while I was doing that. But I also stressed myself because I had started my racing career, and that involved a lot of travel. So between working there, going through this transition with this company, Executone, I was just in the getting married stage at that point, and racing, there was a lot of stuff going on.
How did you get into racing? Like, where does that come in?
So when I was in college, I was a big auto, enthusiast. And initially I was a motorcycle fan, and my parents did everything they could do to thwart my enthusiasm for motorcycles because of them being dangerous. Little did they think that I would end up getting involved in professional auto racing and probably increase the risk coefficient significantly. But
yeah.
I saw a flyer at a gym in the summer, and it said, this gymkhana or autocross events where you can drive your car around these cones in these big parking lots. And, seemed like it was fun. I had a 5-liter Mustang and a a Trans Am, and all the meathead cars of that era that were popular. And so I just showed up, and I met a guy by the name of Peter Cunningham, who's one of the winningest sports car racers in U.S. history,
Mm.
SCA Pro Racing, IMSA, etc. And he said, "Oh, you've got a penchant for this." So I started to kind of follow my heart there, and I had won a sales contest to go to one of these driving schools and did pretty well there. And I thought, oh, the opportunity will pop up, but it just seemed like such an expensive opportunity that I'm not going to be able to afford this.
Right.
Well,
And
someone tried.
probably will never make money, right? Like the odds of making money in racing cars is probably just like horses.
It very, very little, right?
Yeah.
So I go to an amateur race at a little track called Blackhawk Farms in Rockford, Illinois, a hole in the wall. And I'm watching this race and I'm like, my God, I have to do this. So, of course, I threw all good judgment aside, 0 on the emotional intelligence score. I convinced this lady to rent me a race car. I don't know how to change brake pads, oil, nothing else. And I rent it, and I end up winning like my first 8 races. So you go and you get a novice permit that allows you to race at an amateur level, and then you kind of work your way up the food chain.
So
So
are these races multiple cars on the track at the same time, or are they time trials?
no, this is multiple cars on the track at the same time.
That's
So
fun, man. That's fun.
it was crazy, and but I had some limited success, and then you're a new person in this community of people that have been doing this a while, especially at an amateur level. And I had so many people trying to help me and elevate me to a pro level that those opportunities started to knock on the door. And sports car racing at the time had made a big resurgence.
Mm.
And, you know, Dodge had pumped money into it, BMW, Mazda. And so you had different opportunities. And, I was a reasonable representative for some of these marks, or at least they thought I would be. So Dodge came to me. They introduced this car called the Neon, and
Okay.
it was a
Yep.
crap box, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they made a racing version of it, and they wanted to promote it as a sportier car. So they built a race version of it. They gave me one for cheap, and they said, "We're going to start this series. You just have to show up at these races, and we'll give you a participation trophy, basically, a couple of bucks, which would cover your costs. And but if you performed well there, you made some money."
Mm.
But I was balancing my career and that at the same time, and with some success there, then other doors opened. I got to race for an organization called Real Time Racing. They had a Honda contract for about 35 years. Ironically, it was with Peter Cunningham, who was my initial coach when I
Mm-hmm.
was driving time trials through the cones. And although I raced for some other teams along the way, he and I still remain friends. But gosh, we won manufacturer championships. We raced with IndyCar when they weren't on ovals, Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, all over North America. And, for the week that you're there, you're a star. And then
Right.
you go right back to normal life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So what does it take to become like, a NASCAR driver? Like how do these guys become NASCAR drivers? Like what is that typical path? And maybe even NASCAR is a bad example. Like Formula One, it seems like it's a lot of European dudes. But like how do you become that?
It's a good question. So, Formula One path, NASCAR path, IndyCar path, and sports car are quite different.
Hmm.
So, in Formula One, there's so much money in that sport, right? International sport.
And there's only
Now,
20 guys who get to be drivers, right? So that's like
best drivers in the world, right? And
yeah.
these are not normal guys that are just good drivers that jumping in a car their whole life. And now it's become even crazier because these kids are 4 and 5 years old and they start in go-karts.
Yeah.
And go-karts very different than like a street car or a race car because you don't have as many adjustments to suspension and things like that. You're not talking with an engineer on how to adjust things, but you're learning how to race, drive, pass
Hmm.
the race line and things like that. But the costs are, even in go-karting at the higher levels, are huge because small things that can be done to a motor that are very expensive are the difference between maybe a great driver finishing third and first. So people that have money or that can attract money or are willing to sacrifice their time or all of their income in something else to put their young son or daughter in a go-kart can rise to the crop. Now, talent is foremost, but money is almost equal to that. And then there'll be recognized kids in that space, and they'll go and race a Formula Ford, and then a Formula Atlantic, and or Formula 2000. And in Europe, there's a different path than in the U.S. But you chip your way up, and then you get to a point where, unless you're in an extremely wealthy family, you have to start securing sponsors,
Mm.
and that you may end up having to talk to 20 to have somebody that'll even entertain having the discussion. So the Formula One path is extremely expensive. An American has not been successful there for decades, and now Cadillac's entering Formula One again. So we'll see how all that pans out. But the budgets there are incredibly high.
Mm-hmm.
In NASCAR, the path in the U.S. is a little bit different. Dirt tracks, some sports car drivers. One of my very good friends, Boris, said, was in the motocross area. Then he ended up in sports cars, and he ended up helping Dale Earnhardt Sr. set up a car for one of the races, because Boris was a sports car guy. Dale was an oval guy. He got Dale's car squared away, and after that, Dale helped him, rise to the top. And but it's not cheap even in the States, like sprint car racing and some of these other series. The family has to pony up, or family friend or a family friend's business, to pay for this stuff. And the payback until you get to a real high level is it's there, but it doesn't cover your costs for sure.
A very, very small amount of people make money, and almost everybody else just pretty much probably loses money, right?
Exactly. I mean, even when I did it, there were years that I made money because of contingency money, or in the right car at the right year, or we did a lot of work with the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, which we would donate any race winnings or contingency money to put kids through college or secondary education. If their father or their mom was killed in training or in action during the global war on terror, corporations love that.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd flock to you and they'd say, hey, we'll help fund your racing. Keep working with them, but we want to be involved in that charity and the visibility that you bring that charity. And that helped attract sponsors in addition to any driving talent that I had. And I was very passionate about that charity. I met so many wonderful people in that space. And my first story, and I'll try to make it short. The first race I used that charity, or was involved with that charity, a little guy by the name of Dustin Rodriguez. His dad had been killed in Iraq after the first Gulf War. They were transporting a young Iraqi girl for an operation. They didn't really tell anyone. And F-15 ended up shooting one of our own helicopters down, and he lost his father. And he tells me, Mr. Esayian, I hosted him for the week at Mid-Ohio. One day I'm going to come back here with the Black Hawk, just like my dad flew. And, I'm going to show you that I can do it. And lo and behold, fast forward 15 years, and here this young man was flying Black Hawk helicopters. Like, those are the stories that really, are kind of shocking at some point that these things happen. But it makes you respect what racing could do for charities, but also all these great kids and families that were impacted over that 20 years of, battling abroad, while here I am figuring out ways to make money and get into race cars.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great story, and great when you can help be a part of that. So how did you get into this book thing? Tell me that you told me the story, but you got to elaborate here.
So I'll jump around a little bit, but I had started a consulting company after I left the Bain Capital, and I was working with direct response companies that were selling products on television.
Okay. Did you have experience with that at Bane? Was this something you saw at Bane, and then you're like, okay, I can do this?
I was at Bain, and I met the guys that made the television show Cops, Scott Barber and John Lane, right? And so I meet these guys, and they were buying a telephone system from Executone, which is the company Bane was going through cleaning up. So I meet these guys in Santa Monica, and they say to me, hey, we would love you to come in and work with us. We were putting Cops on television, but all of the profanity, violence, sexual content that they couldn't put on TV, they would put on VHS tapes. This is how long ago it was, or DVDs, but they'd buy the media within the show. So they were selling this stuff and making a ton of money. And I said, I don't know anything about that business. And they said, we want someone to run the business. We've got a marketer that can deal with all of that. So they hired me, and it was on a consulting basis for a year or so. I learned this business, and I thought, man, these guys they got jets, they got Ferraris. This is fantastic. I want to go and do this. So I decided after probably a year, 18 months, that I'd go off on my own and do it. And so I started a direct response company with the limited funds I had, and I promptly failed. So I struggled. I couldn't get anything to work with doing shows on TV. I went to a couple other big direct response companies. I would take their database and sell more of the same product to these people. So if you bought Miracle Blade knives, we'd sell you more knives, or the sharpener, or the cutting block, or forks and spoons, whatever that might be. Skincare, the same thing. So I learned the business, and I met a couple of people, and we decided, hey, let's take our combined skills and let's go and try a product. And this is maybe around 2006, 2007. The economy's getting a little wobbly. Mortgage rates were going up, and there was some deregulation in the lending space. So we thought, man, the economy's going to tank. Let's write a book called Debt Cures. And when we started, we're like, we know there's an opportunity for this, and nobody wants to walk in a bookstore and buy a book that says, hey, I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. Let's sell it on TV and we can ship it to somebody's home. So we're like, who's going to sell this? And at the time, there was a show called Weight Loss Cures they don't want you to know about. Kevin Trudeau was the host. He had a kind of a little bit of a shaky background, but we called him up and said, hey, will you do this show? And he's like, I want 150 grand for the day and 3 points of the gross. We told him, fine. So now we had to write a script. We had to find a producer. And all of this was new to us because we were really working on the back end, or we were corporate guys. We had an attorney mixed in, and we didn't even have a book written.
But so you had the sales system. You had no product. That's hilarious.
That's it. I mean, we took a book. I think it might have been Name Your Book, and we put a cover on it that made the book look real.
Yeah.
And we started to sell it, and we quickly realized, based on what the cost per order was and the average order, with simulating this thing, we spent maybe 30, 40 grand on television media, remnant media, that this had legs. But we were the dog that chased the car. Now what do? We don't even have a book.
So you're selling this book before it basically even exists?
Exactly. So we pre-authorized the cards, but we didn't charge people. And then we'd write them a note, hey, the product is not fully developed. We're going to get it to you, within 6 weeks, and we'll give it to you for free since you were early. But now you have to pull the media down. And now everyone's seen that, oh, somebody's going to sell this. So now any competitive companies that see this, you're in a race to who's to the market first. So I sat on the beach for probably 4 weeks. I read maybe 30 different books on how to get out of debt. And every, mortgage broker, auto finance person, lawyer that I knew, I'd invite them down to the beach for lunch, and I'd say, how can we knock somebody's mortgage down? What could you do to refinance a car? How do you deal with a credit card company to ask them to lower your rate? And we found things through traditional means and non-traditional means, and we wrote the outline of a book. We put Kevin on the front of it, and we sold, probably almost $100 million worth of Debt Cures product, newsletters, other upsells. And we would get emails from people that said, I wanted to jump off the bridge, and this book saved me.
Wow.
And we made a ton of money. I mean, I couldn't have printed money fast enough while we were doing this. And the company grew and grew, and we realized, let's outsource this because this won't last forever. The economy will turn around. People are going to get out of debt. Then we started to go into other product categories. We did a Navy SEAL coin collection after the team guys got Bin Laden, I think in 2011.
Hey, Nick, by the way, 4.1 stars on Amazon. People like your writing. They're still attributed to Kevin.
That's old. Yeah.
I
we
got it right here in front of me. Kevin's doing a little one of these kind of poses.
exactly
Yeah,
that.
people like it.
I don't even know who's selling it anymore. I still think we have the rights to it, and we probably have somebody else selling it, but that sold solidly from 2007, and different iterations of it through maybe 2012 or 13. And we probably did 20 other projects, of which maybe 3 or 4 worked.
Mhm.
Um, Justice Coin and a few others, a book called Free Money. And you got to a certain point, and then online sales was just eating into TV sales.
Mm.
And we would hire people that were experts in online. Now, keep in mind, 2013, 15, 16, we'd keep them for a while, and someone would hire them away and pay them twice as much.
Mm.
If we tried to promote them to a manager, they didn't know how to manage people because they were a technical expert. So Harvard Business School, by the way, did a case study on this whole business
Mm.
that we did. Um, my partner was a good friend of mine, Ari Wasserman, very different than me. By that time, I was divorced. I'm racing cars. I'm doing search and rescue work for the San Diego Sheriff Department, and my partner is writing Jewish law books. And when he come to see me on the beach, he's wearing a black trench coat and a yarmulke.
Uh,
Yeah, very different. But anyway, that we had a great run, and then 2017, 18, when online resurgence or the online selling and Amazon had kind of taken over, we knew that our days were limited, and
yeah.
um, you know, we both could have retired, but I had an expensive divorce. My
Mm.
partner retired, never to work again. And here I am, and there's a story behind that because this whole thing came out of the race world. But
Yeah.
the direct response business was great. Um, it was crazy. I have a million stories. We'll write a book one day just about that. But we were printing money, but we also quickly learned that all you're doing is stringing a bunch of hits together. And when the environment changes, you have to make adjustments. And we
Mm-hmm.
probably didn't do a great job of making adjustments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a as you said, tough business because like you got that hit, but now it's like, can we replicate this? Will we ever be able to replicate this? And
Uh,
you can
thousands.
maybe get some residuals over time, but the revenue is going to just drop and go down from that particular product.
That was it. And you couldn't build infrastructure yourself, right? Because you had to, the business would grow too fast. You couldn't keep up with it. Or when the hit would go away, now you'd have to lay people off. So we outsourced, and
Mm,
you're paying a bit of a premium there. But, think about a company doing 60, $70 million a year in revenue with only 8 employees. It was a
pretty fun.
fantastic
Yeah,
business,
pretty
right?
fun. Fun
Um,
time.
Fun times. And if I had to go back, we would have done a better job of getting ahead of things in terms of the transition to online sales. And I think we were just too fat and happy. We were kind of wallowing in our success. Um, you know, I was busy doing other things. And when you
Hmm.
get better at spending money than making money, you're on a bad trajectory. And I probably was there.
Hmm. Okay, so you aren't able to retire after this, or maybe you're close but not quite there. So what comes after that, where you're like, man, we had this amazing run, but it's kind of coming to an end?
So I probably could have retired, but my divorce was expensive. So I had made the most money I'd ever made in the 3 years running up to the divorce. And in
Mm.
California, you know,
Oh yeah, yeah.
there's
I
nowhere to
got
hide.
I so that I gotta say or ask there no prenup in place.
No, 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 no. And when we started,
I'm getting a prenup right now. Like
y-
my fiance's a sweetheart, but she goes, within an hour of meeting me, you told me we're getting a prenup, and I was like, is that true? She's like, it's true, and I was like, all right, well, at least I laid it out there for you.
happiness is a function of expectation. If you bring it up early, you're solid. And my former wife, who I get along with wonderfully, she's a great co-parent. Um, but we didn't have a prenup. We didn't have anything when we got married. So,
Right.
we built it together, kind of. But when I got divorced, I mean, it was a 8-figure, dollar amount by the time I was done. And then concurrent to that, I got big into the real estate space. I bought a house,
Mm,
2 houses, 4 units,
this is
16 units.
post '08 kind of thing.
Yeah,
Mm,
well, leading up to '08.
yeah.
So right at '08, I made the right before everything collapsed. So as I'm making money on debt cures, I'm not following my own advice.
Yeah.
And I decide to transition from apartments where there's cash flow to buying a whole bunch of lots, and I'm going to become a developer. Well, the lots I bought, many of them went from a value of probably $500,000 each in North Scottsdale to 50 grand each. And I had a moral dilemma of, do you do the short sale and walk away? I couldn't do it, so I wrote another big check. So that divorce, it was huge. And I was still retired, and I still could have squeezed out of it. But I tried a couple of things after that, and I was just struggling. I was still racing. I was still busy. I'm trying to parent or co-parent. Divorce is the start sometimes of where conflict comes into play because you're operating separately. You haven't figured out how to work with that person yet. And although we were both doing a good job of parenting, we didn't necessarily get along. And I just lost my purpose. And we had started a dating site. We had some luck there, got some patents, and
Patents.
it was unique.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So you know what Snapchat is, where you do the
course.
video and it disappears. Most people in the dating space, the biggest complaints are when I go to meet someone, they don't look like the person that they pretend to be. So what we did is we created where if I meet Sue Smith online and you match, she could ask me a question, and now I would have like a Snapchat type technology that I could do a video, answer her question, and she knew what I looked like today. Was I confident? Did I have one tooth in my mouth? The whole thing. And we spun that up. We papered some of it, which of course takes years and money. We ran some commercials. We had the dating app up and running. The commercial
What was
still is on.
the name of it?
It was called Real Date, REEL.date.
Makes sense. I get it. Yeah.
It was great. And, we had a great television commercial, but the cost per order, we were going to have to deficit fund this thing. And we just couldn't get traction there. And I didn't know enough about going out to get third-party funds, meaning fundraising. And I wish I would have spent some more time learning about that because I think that had more traction. And we still have the patents, but we probably spent $500,000-$600,000 on that, and it didn't work. It was a timing issue, and it was an issue of a lack of expertise in the fundraising side or too much ego to go and find somebody else to be able to outsource that function to. Then the digital currency thing started when Bitcoin got a little bit of momentum. We had a company called Unlock Bitcoin that allowed people, let's say a regular Fox News or CNN watcher that was not technically astute, when what's Bitcoin? It's up to $1,000. It's up to $10,000. And what it allowed you to do is learn how to use the various brokerages where you could buy digital currency because there was no real Coinbase at that time.
Yeah.
And it gave you lessons, and then you had the ability to simulate buying, and you could see if you were making money or losing money. And when Coinbase started, we had a conversation with them of, wow, you're developing these customers, you're educating them, we'll buy the customer base from you, and then we can convert them to be able to buy digital currency. And Bitcoin went up to 10 grand, and when it went down to 1,000, all the people that were involved said, gosh, we don't want to pay these $30,000, $40,000 subscription fees for all these feeds. Let's let it go. Well, we know what's happened with Bitcoin since then. So again, another lesson in raising funds, timing, patience, etc. Chalk up 2 failures after a big success. So now he's a little bit of self-doubt.
Yeah.
Get this.
Well, that is something that that entrepreneurs, they have maybe too much confidence in their ability to like, oh, I built this huge business, I'll just go do it again. Like, I was kind of working through that. Like I'm buying my business partner out currently from the business. And, I talked to people and they were like, Alex, you've been like really successful with this business. But let's just remember, it's not easy to build a $50 million a year business. And I'm like, oh, I totally understand that. I believe in my ability to go do it again, but I also totally understand that it may never happen again. Like, it's just not the easiest thing in the world to just spin up a business that's that big and successful.
No, it's true. And I mean, hats off to you in doing that. And sometimes, you have a good idea of what your partner is doing and contributing. But at the same point, all of our personalities are different. And I learned that my friend that would wear the trench coat with the yarmulke down to the beach, I was probably better at writing the book or picking the people to be in the show, but he was much better at, the regression analysis for media or managing, a fulfillment center that was doing a couple million minutes of teleservices time a month. I knew that existed, but I didn't know how hard that person's job was because I thought, oh, you know, I'm the protagonist of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you probably have a little bit of that going on right now as you buy it out because you're having to figure out ways to complete the task that the other person was doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was interesting because one thing I didn't think that was happening for like the last 10 years of me and my partner running this together was like there was like a shared sense of responsibility that I didn't even know existed. But now that he's gone and it's like you're the sole owner and you're the sole CEO, now it's like, shoot, I'm responsible for everything now. There's
Yeah.
no like other person I can say, well, yeah, have you talked to Austin or what does he think? Um, so that is like something that I didn't really even think existed 10 years ago, but now I can totally know that it's real because now I feel it. And yeah, that's been interesting. It's fun. I like it. I'm excited. I wouldn't have done it and spent the money to buy my partner out if I wasn't excited about it, but it has been interesting.
Do you think that there's two components to that? There's the functional component of what the person did, and then there's a psychological component of you being alone?
I think it's more psychological for me. Like, not I'm not
I agree.
discounting what he was doing, but now it's like, hey, if this succeeds, it's on you. If it fails, it's also on you. And like
That's right.
every decision, you can't be like, well, I don't know, that was kind of his department, or we jointly decided that we were going to do this thing. Even if you didn't jointly decide, it's still like, well, you share some amount of responsibility for these decisions. That's gone, and it's just me, and I'm like, okay, well, this is what I asked for. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but
And
I'm
there's
excited.
benefits. There's benefits to it and negatives to it, and it's great. I mean, there's the man in the arena speech, and
Yeah.
when you're having a rough day, make sure you have that posted somewhere because all the people that sit on the couch and will say, "Hey, bravo that you're going to do this," and then when you struggle, they'll whisper to each other, "Oh, I knew he was going to fail,"
Yeah.
and they're still sitting on the couch, right?
Mhm.
And when Tiger Woods went back and won the Masters again. Um, I'm not a huge golf fan, but it kind of gave me a lump in my throat that here's somebody that every public built up, and then they were happy when he failed, when he had struggles with his wife and some other things, and then they're cheering him on again. And they're, based on what you're doing, your understanding of all these different businesses of people that you speak with, you're the person that's out there in front of everyone. You're going to succeed and fail in front of your friends, in front of your family. And it takes a unique person to be able to do that and be durable enough to get through the downs and the ups to continue. And you're going to have that. And I'm telling you, over the last 7 years in this business, and we can talk a little bit about how this all started, but this has been the hardest thing that I've ever done. We are in, conflicts and congruent with the NFL. Uh, you have these two giant companies that have been in the football helmet business for almost 100 years each.
Mm.
And it has been so challenging. And there are days where it's like, gosh, what did I get myself into? And now I'm 58. I was retired 15 years ago.
Mhm.
Am I going to be able to get this thing across the finish line? And sometimes when you're alone, you have that doubt. And, that's where that reading that speech will serve you well.
Mm. So tell me about the business then. So you kind of go through these things, and then is the next thing this helmet business, and how dare you think that you can build a helmet company? That's just audacious and crazy.
So I'm in the paddock at Long Beach, and I had finished second in Long Beach Grand Prix, Pirelli World Challenge. Great race. Finished second to my teammate. And Boris said, the NASCAR gentleman I was telling you about, taps me on the shoulder. And he said, hey, Bill Simpson. And Simpson Racing, they made seatbelts and seats and Nomex suits. And people most likely remember him from the insurance commercial where they lit a guy in a fire suit on fire sitting there and put
Okay.
him out. But Bill had an 8th grade education, but he was brilliant, idiot savant. He made race seats, helmets, window nets, 3-layer Nomex suits. He'd change. I wouldn't even be talking to you here today. I would have probably gotten killed at least a couple of times in my race career if it weren't for his products. Well, he sold Simpson Racing, and he and Chip Ganassi, who's another big name in IndyCar, NASCAR, and sports car, they started a football helmet company after Bill had gone to a Colts game. One of the players had gotten knocked out. Bill looked at the helmet and thought, I can apply what I learned in auto racing in impact attenuation and materials and lighter weight to football. So he started this company, and after 3 or 4 years, he had gotten frustrated. And here I am at Long Beach, and you're around these people. It's like a traveling circus 24 weeks out of the year at all these races. So Boris makes the introduction, and I had another friend that was a combat controller in the Air Force that had just retired. He had a young son playing football and said, hey, these helmets are great. You should buy that company because you played a little college football. You know how to run a business. Direct to consumer is great, especially for youth sports. And you're wrapping up your racing career. You need something else to do. Plus, you got to go and make some money again. So I pondered it, talked to Bill. Bill was a unique personality, very like no filter. I mean, he would say things that, I don't have a filter, and he was by far worse. So took us a year or so, and I called a couple of friends. One of my good friends, Joe Hegner, was a former CEO at TD Securities Global. He was retired, lived down the street from me. A gentleman that's a chief operating officer here now was kind of like my partner that, you had, that more of an operational guy. He was in the real estate space. Jimmy Edmonds, a baseball player, and a few other people. I said, let's buy this thing. I think the technology is novel. There were some patents. It wasn't making money. We got it for the right price.
Were they still applying? They were doing football at that time. They weren't trying to.
They were just doing football.
Yep,
that's correct. And in the success they had is they had Jeff Saturday and Dwight Freeney.
Oh yeah.
In like the early 2010, 11, 12, wearing this helmet, and it was ugly. It was horribly ugly. The inside looked like styrofoam. It was a Kevlar or carbon fiber shell with the expanded polypropylene or expanded polypropylene internal, and the ugliest face mask that you'd have ever seen. And I looked at this and I'm like, man, if we restyle this a little bit, maybe we'll get some traction. So we collectively put a couple $1 million in. We got it fired up. We sold everything we can make and said, wow, there is a market for a lighter football helmet. And they were all youth and high school helmets at the time. And then we flew out east to try to raise some money. And I thought, I'm not going to make the mistake I did last time. We're going to go out and raise some money. I met with a gentleman by the name of Richard Green, who owns First Trust Bank.
Okay.
Owns part of the Eagles. And we sat down. He's in a suit, tie, spend 2 hours with him. He's like, okay, I'll invest. I'll put, I don't remember, it was $2 or $3 million into this thing. And I thought, we got it. We stood by the Lombardi Trophy, smiled, took pictures, landed back in San Diego, and voila, the pandemic struck.
Darn it.
So
you just needed that to be 1 or 2 weeks later.
Exactly. We went from euphoric to him calling and saying, hey, I got a lot of problems. This is going to change the economic landscape. I can't take on another project. So my enthusiasm went to laying on the floor with like a bottle of whiskey and a pistol, right? Like there, and it's a football helmet company. So you have a big insurance payment. You have to make it every month. And we had now started. At the same time, my divorce payment's going out. We're paying a little payroll. Then we had to lay everybody off. So there were just the two of us in a small office. We didn't have product. Nobody was buying anything. Nobody was investing.
Nobody's playing football,
Nobody's playing football. What do we do now? And that was a challenging chapter, to say the least.
So you said that Jeff Saturday was using it. Dwight Freeney was using it. What's the process like to get the helmet approved? Maybe like all the way through the chain. I'm assuming it's different for the state of Ohio high school football versus like just some kid's team. There's probably no approval process at all. And then college and pro.
It's a great question. At the time, when they were wearing it, the NFL really didn't have an approval process. There's an organization called NOXI that I don't remember what the actual acronym is for, but it's the National Organization for Sports and Equipment Safety, I think. I never get it right, and I've been saying it for 7 years now, and I can't remember it. If you Google it, you'll be able to rattle it off. It's noxi.org. So they have a minimum standard for impact attenuation, auditing supply lines, making sure that the quality of the product is up to speed and good. And primarily for youth helmets, that was it back then. Now it's radically changed. So there are 3 organizations. There's NOXI, which still exists, and they're the one that's at the baseline for impact, all levels of play. Every helmet that's on the NFL field and down to the youth has to pass or have a NOXI sticker, meaning it's certified. Then there's the independent labs of Virginia Tech. They're like the Consumer Reports of anything helmet. Equestrian, baseball, football, hockey, youth football, flag football, anything you can imagine, construction. And they rate helmets 1 down to whatever, and they're 5-star rated, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, 1-star. Obviously, you want your young player in a 5-star helmet. So you have NOXI, then you have that, then you have the NFL and the NFLPA. And the NFLPA and NFL put together helmet testing, which was part of a settlement after the big lawsuit related to concussion against the NFL, and there were some other parties involved in that for well over $1 billion, I think close to $2 billion, 2012-13. And this testing started in 2017. That testing has developed over time based on what everyone has learned about brain injury, the different types of impacts on the NFL field. Now, that test is only for NFL helmets. So to get an NFL helmet in the locker room, you have to have your NOXI certification. Then you have to submit your helmet to the NFL, and the NFL puts in rigorous testing. And now that testing includes different criteria for different positions, because a quarterback takes a different type of impact than a defensive lineman. And so there's position specific, and the helmet is scored based on that. And there's, they publish a poster. The dark green category is recommended. Then there's a light green, which means they're decent, you should wear it. And then there's yellow, which is not recommended. And then there's actually red, that's banned. When we first started, our helmets were not compliant with NFL play. I think this is like 2019-20 during the pandemic. And our helmets were probably half what a traditional helmet weighed. We knew that on field, we were having fewer injuries, but we couldn't get it past, the NFL standard. And no matter what we tried to sell, even at a youth level, who do you have wearing it in the NFL? Right. We didn't have anyone. So we were struggling. Well, we figured, gosh, let's add weight to the helmet and just see what happens. We'll put it through the same testing. So we did. We added 2 or 2.5 pounds. So we took our 2.5 pound helmet and we made it 5.5 pounds. And lo and behold, it would have passed the test. So we knew the test rewarded weight.
Oh, interesting.
So that was something we were gonna have to deal with. And a small company is not going to change the NFL, nor their testing protocols,
right?
Nor are they going to even listen to us. So we were, the ankle biter in the beginning. As time passed, we started to investigate other technologies that we felt, because we didn't want to give up the lighter weight. And I'll talk a little bit about helmet weight in a second, but we had to stick to that. And that was Bill's premise. We knew in combat, we knew in auto racing that lighter weight helmets provided protection that was less stressful on the cervical structure when you have impacts, or like in football when you get tackled and your head slams into the ground, or the running back gets hit and his head slams to the side. If you can reduce the weight but continue to protect at the same level, you're providing a better product. So we chiseled and investigated different technologies, and a company called Collide, Kollide, they had approached us. They said, nobody will give us helmet shells for us to build our new novel technology on the inside and test. And we thought, gosh, nobody's helping us. Let's help these guys. Maybe something will happen in the future. So we gave them some helmet geometry, and off they went. We didn't hear from them again. Concurrent to all this, the NFL had some grants as they were trying to develop technology. Our friends at Clyde went. They got a big grant from the NFL for $1 million, and they came back to us and said, "Guess what, guys? We've got a technology that can fit inside your helmet that allows you to keep the weight light, and we can still pass this test." So, fast forward to today, we are the number one new helmet for quarterback, offensive line, and defensive line per the NFLPA and NFL, which is great for us.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Williams wearing our helmet,
There you go.
Cam Jordan, Kyle Juszczyk, Tyrod Taylor, probably 50 guys in the NFL. We probably have about 450 helmets in the NFL, hundreds of NCAA players, thousands, if not tens of thousands of high school and youth players. And now the company's growing. And that process to get in the NFL was so challenging and stressful. And we were fighting City Hall because there are some flaws in the test that we didn't agree. So you still had to check those boxes that you didn't agree with, but get to the end result you wanted. And that was hard.
Can you talk about the weight thing? I think probably if someone's listening, they've never played football before, I think that they would be shocked by how heavy a football helmet is. And I would imagine they get heavier and heavier the larger of a person you are, right? Like if you're a 6'8", 380-pound guard, like you're not going to have a normal sized helmet. The helmet's going to be enormous. And when I first picked up a football helmet and put it on my head, I was like, this is crazy. I'm like, it was shocking, honestly. Because I was like, oh, I can kick for the football team. And I was like, honestly, I don't even know if I can kick with this thing on. Like
Yeah.
it was shocking to me how heavy it was.
You know, it's interesting. So when Virginia Tech came out with these tests, and then the NFL came out with these tests, what ended up happening was these companies wanted to perform well on the tests. So they just added more padding, more size, more weight, more mass, more dense face mask, all these different components.
Sounds
And
like makes sense in theory.
it makes sense in theory, right? And when we started this, the heaviest youth helmet, number one youth helmet at the time, the company's now defunct, was 6 pounds. So if you have a 6-year-old kid that weighs 60 pounds, it's 10% of the body weight. It'd be like me wearing a 200 or 21-pound helmet because I weigh 210 pounds.
I mean, forget putting it on your head, put it on your chest. Like go walk around with a 20-pound weight vest on and be like, holy cow, like this would be horrible to try to play a sport with this on. I always like when I'm walking with a weight vest, I'm like, I just hope I don't get mugged right now because I'm like, there's nothing I would be able to do. You know, you just get thrown to the ground and be like, ah.
It's true, right? I mean, even the plate carriers, like when the Iraq War started in 2003, they had a gel pack behind them. It was a huge piece of steel, and they were 23, 24 pounds. The composite plates now are even more protective, and they weigh 3 pounds. 4 pounds in the plate carrier. But what was happening is there's only two competitors in the space, or three at the time. The helmet just got bigger and bigger and bigger and heavier, and the hybrid 3-head form that they would test these things on and shoot a pneumatic ram on it or drop it, there's no stress on the neck, right? It's just a mechanical neck. And when we started looking at impacts, we agreed with what Bill Simpson had said originally, because remember, he was protecting guys in a race car going 200 miles an hour. And, the reason the Hans device came out, which hooks your head to your shoulders, is people were dying from basal skull fractures. You crash your car, you're in a restraint in a race seat, and your head is 8 pounds, and the helmet, let's say it's 6 or 8 pounds, when it would slam forward in a 100G impact was literally thousands of pounds of stress on your cervical structure.
And it was just like breaking people's necks.
Exactly. Basal skull fractures. That's what happened to Dale Earnhardt. And the Hans device connecting the helmet to kind of a horse collar that was reducing those forces. But in football, the forces are not as great. The speeds aren't as great. But
could there be like a Hans device for a football player, hypothetically? Like something that would connect to like your shoulder pads or something like that?
There can be. But in racing, most of the time, you're covered by a seat that's protecting your head, and you hit and your head goes forward. In football, you still have to have a
Yeah.
greater range of motion.
Okay.
So the weight thing was such a component in that, and we knew it was, but we're like, gosh, we're not going to do well in the lab test unless we can add weight. So it was a real challenge to develop the technology to keep the helmet weight low,
Mm-hmm.
yet offer the same level of protection. Now, I had mentioned these Virginia Tech rating system before. Our helmets now are number one for varsity, number one for youth, number one for flag, number one for soccer headgear. And we've been able to keep the weight below everyone else. So even traditional helmets today are around 5 pounds from our competitors. We have our helmets down. We have helmets that are 2.75 pounds to about 3.5 pounds. The NOXI organization, that's kind of the benchmark or the baseline for approved helmets, they did a study at the University of Ottawa and at Virginia Tech that determined that 14 and under players were far more likely with a heavier helmet to get injured, head and neck, concussive events, etc. So they are now requiring in 2027 that every helmet is under 3.5 pounds.
Hey,
So for
nice.
us,
Yeah.
is a big victory, right? Like, here's the small company. We can provide better impact attenuation because we do well on all these tests, but we can also maintain the lower weight. And that's where the home run's been. Now, why can't the big companies do it? Because they didn't have to. Nobody was coming, there was no competition. And if you think about football, the NFL is predicated on competition, but there was no competition in the football helmet space. So when we showed up to compete with Schutt and to compete with Riddell, and now this little company has got number one helmets across the board that weigh far less, and the costs are very similar. But it was an exercise that required our engineer here. His name's Kodiak Brush. We hired him. He's an MIT graduate, and he played football there. Where are you going to find a guy like that? We have a dozen doctors on our medical advisory board, some who I knew through racing. And we said, guys, we have this lighter football helmet. It tests very well, but the weight, they flock to us. And we still have doctors. We have the head of neurology at Baptist Health, Michael McDermott. Peter Cummings wrote the book Brainwashed with Merrill Hodge from the Steelers about head injury, the former head physician of the Chargers. And we just keep adding and adding and adding. So when you look at who is involved with this company now, we've got about 13 NFL players that own part of the company.
Saw Tony Romo's involved at some capacity.
That's right. Tony Romo, Cam Jordan, Kyle Juszczyk, Tyrod Taylor, Drew Statton, Dennis Pitta. The list goes on, and it's continuing to expand. Last year at the Super Bowl, and unfortunately now since deceased, I met with the founder of FedEx, Fred Smith.
Oh, yep.
And his son was the offensive coordinator on the Steelers, and now he's offensive coordinator at Ohio State. His other son, Cannon, played quarterback at Memphis. He had interest in this, and when we showed him the data and the ratings and that we had lower weight, he now was our biggest investor. Unfortunately, he passed, but his family continues to carry the torch with us. But now that we have this momentum, the competition is, turning the cannon toward us, right? Because we're the disruptor. We're the new kid on the block. You guys aren't making a light helmet, and you're not making a helmet that performs as well as ours. And in most cases, your helmets are more expensive. So now we're on the radar. We're not an ankle biter anymore.
Well, that has its own upsides too. I would imagine that this would have been like the number one helmet for kickers, because I'm just thinking, like, if I'm kicker, I'm just hoping I don't get hit. If you get hit as a kicker, that's a bad game. Something went wrong. But I would imagine that kickers would be adopting this very, very quickly, and maybe even like, I don't know. You said offensive linemen and defensive linemen. That's a little surprising to me, because I would have thought those guys would just think bigger is better, sort of thing. Whereas I would have thought like wide receivers and DBs would be like light, fast, move quick.
It's interesting, right? Because we have two customers. We got the person wearing it, and you got the person buying it.
Okay.
Nobody buys their own football helmet. So if you're a kid, your parents buy it.
Right.
If you're a little older kid, the youth team buys it. If you're in high school, the high school buys it.
Right.
College, pros, right? The only people that buy their own helmets are female professional football players. We'll talk about that later.
Interesting.
Then you have the person that's buying it. The person that's wearing it, how does it look? Who else is wearing it in the pros?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I play in it? The person buying it, is it safe? How much does it cost? And oh yeah, I have to get these things refurbished every year or 2 years and inspected. How easy is that? So they're diametrically opposed in terms of what they're looking at. So you have to sell both. So we really needed to go out and get the NFL players that had the drip for the kids to want to wear it, even though the kid helmet has nothing to do with the NFL helmet.
Right.
Right? They look the same, and people don't know that. They think, oh, my helmet's got the hex on the forehead. It's just like, the player that you see on Sunday. It's not the case. So you have to have the economic case in place in the safety case, but you also have to have the performance and the appearance for the player, and bringing those together is a challenge.
That's interesting that you say that, like, they don't buy their own helmets, and I guess that sort of makes sense. So, like, hypothetically, let's say if I'm a pro, I assume that I can get my own helmet, but I'm just going to show up to Cleveland Browns training camp. They're just going to say, "Hey, we're Riddell. That's our brand," and they just hand me that. Is that sort of how that's going to work?
So the NFL has their test, and once you are approved for that test, the helmets can be purchased by the team. It means that they're approved for NFL play. Then each individual equipment manager, and they have prior relationship with Riddell, prior relationship with Schutt. Some of them have relationships with our guys. We're trying to break into that.
Yeah.
But those equipment managers will buy helmets based on the ratings that the NFLPA and the NFL have, and their relationship with the various companies. They're not too concerned about cost in the NFL, because a quarterback now, a top tier quarterback's making $55 million. If this helmet costs $1,500, that's the least of their worries, and that they want to keep that player on the field. But we have to have the opportunity to educate that equipment manager about weight, about safety, about ratings, about player performance, because this goes well beyond safety, which is the primary. But if you are going to run your 40 at the combine, you wouldn't put a 3-pound baseball hat on.
Right.
Why would you carry extra weight when you play or when you're running?
Yeah. What's the stats like on that? Like, if you put me in a 5-pound helmet and I go run a 40, and then you put me in a 2.7 or 3-pound helmet, like, what is the expected, like, increase or decrease in speed going to be?
Sure. I mean, it's dependent on the player, right? Like, if you get 190-pound speed
that makes sense.
back versus the lineman. But think about auto racing. They'll spend in Formula One millions of dollars to shed 2 pounds, right? Now, that's a 1,500 or 1,600-pound car with 800-900 horsepower. When you have a human running and you have an additional 3 pounds, and you can get rid of that. When you watch players now, there's no knee pads. There's no thigh pads.
Yeah.
There's no girdle or hip pads. Why is that? Shoulder pads have gotten smaller because they're trying to reduce weight.
Right.
I can take more weight out of the helmet than you've done by doing all of those things.
And it sounds like now make it as safe, if not safer.
And we are. Now, there are people that think, well, heavier is better. I'd rather be in the Suburban than in the BMW. Well, if I'm 210 and you're 212, sorry, we should probably reverse those.
Yeah.
That 2-pound difference doesn't matter. But what does matter is your neck is a fulcrum, right? Your head moves around. When we add 3 pounds to that, and we have a 50 or an 80 or 100 G impact, let's say it's 100, that's 300 pounds of additional stress on your cervical structure. You have fatigue. You have the extra weight being carried. It's being carried at the highest part of the body, which is worse. If you watch MMA fighting, I can take a lot of abuse when you're just punching me, but if you catch me and you snap my head from side to side,
that's when people.
So if I have a heavy, that's it. So if I have a heavy face mask, that potentially is a safety issue, but it's also a performance issue. And concussions don't come, or head injury don't come in. They're not binary, 0 and 100. There's a lot of slivers in between there where you don't demonstrate symptoms. And the goal is to reduce the frequency of those injuries, but also reduce the severity of it. And the weight, by reducing weight, along with the ability to absorb impact equally to or better than the heavier helmets, we kind of check all those boxes. And that's why this year our sales already in January are 700% over where they were last year.
Heck yeah.
So it's starting to catch on, but I have to dye my wig every so often because I have so much gray hair from the last 7 years of stress. And, it's still a battle. We expect our competitors to push back, and you got to educate the players. How do you get to an NFL player? There's not like a directory. So you use social media. Do you go to the agents? Do you go to the financial advisors? Do you go to the families? Well, we have 12 NFL owners or 14 NFL players. They go to their friends. Player comes to us. We're like, wow, we'd love you to wear it. Go ask your equipment guy. The equipment guy sometimes gets mad at us and says, you shouldn't be talking to our players without us. Well, we called you when he called us.
Right.
We can't tell him we're not interested in helping him. So, you're kind of caught in a rock and a hard place at some point. So we've had to be diplomatic. And in some cases, I probably have been less diplomatic than I should have been. But that also facilitates conversation when you bang the drum and make some noise.
Yeah. And I have to imagine some of those equipment managers are not, 31-year-olds who are reading the science, at night. They're 60-year-old dudes, and I've been the equipment manager for the Bengals for the last 2 decades. I remember when we had Iggy here doing the Iggy shuffle, and Schutz my brand, and that's what we buy. I'm sure that there's some of that.
There's a lot of it. Now, there are all of these guys have the best intentions when it comes to their players.
Of course.
I will say that I don't agree with everything that the NFL does, but the NFL makes more money on media when the starting quarterback is playing than the second string guy. There are more eyes on that. The media sells for more. They want these guys on the field. The product is better. The equipment managers have very personal relationships with all of these players, and they care about the players. And there's no question about that. But if the equipment guys don't allow us to come in to talk about the science and explain why the product or the materials or the 3D printed internals or the lower weight, or listen to what our doctors have to say or what other equipment managers have seen in terms of keeping players on the field, and they don't hear that because, they're stuck in their ways. They have a relationship with another company. They don't want to bring another vendor in, whatever that may be. Those are challenging situations. And, whether you deal with the player, upper management, the equipment manager, we have to get in some way or another. And, being an entrepreneur and being an innovator, or disruptor, you have to push. Now, there are a lot of equipment managers. And I mean, I'll give you a couple examples. The Lions were probably the biggest customer of ours the first year we were NFL approved. But, we have helmets on marquee players at the 49ers, at the Raiders, the Rams, the Chargers, the Jets, et cetera, et cetera. And we have kickers, we have quarterbacks, linemen. Now, wide receivers, defensive backs, speed guys, you'd think they'd want light. We have Denzel Ward on the Browns.
Oh, yeah, that's our guy.
And he great player. We're thrilled to have him wearing the helmet. I've never even talked to him. Now, is he wearing it because it's light? Probably. And we know that education process is quote unquote a process. It's not an event. So this coming year, we're spending more time trying to meet with equipment managers, educate, go to events. We've done this before, and sometimes people will pensively walk by and not want to engage. So we've got to be a little more aggressive there. And then you got to go to the players. And sometimes that's just creating a video and getting that out on social where they'll see it and say, here's the science, here's the performance advantage. You're the CEO of you. You need to be careful related to how's your career move forward? Because we've seen quarterbacks that have gotten 2, 3 very visible concussions.
Andrew Luck, right? Andrew Luck.
I mean, unfortunately, Tua had a series of concussions.
Oh, that was bad too. Yeah. Forgot about that.
And it impacted, a lot of people in that organization. You go from a playoff team to not having your starter. And the equipment guy there is fantastic. He was one of the guys that helped us from the beginning. And he absorbs all the information, but the player still is going to wear what they want to wear. And sometimes they don't listen either. And it's like, I've been wearing this helmet, I'll jump back in it again. So it's an education process. And I liken it to Tesla. When Tesla first came out with a car, it was a Lotus Elise that had an electric motor and a big battery in it.
Mm-hmm.
The Lotus Elise was a fun car, but it wasn't necessarily a bastion of reliability or practicality,
Mm-hmm.
right? The majority of people didn't even look at it or know it existed. We were there a year or two ago on the helmet side. Then when they introduced, their next series of cars, you get the early adopters that kind of come in and they're willing to listen. And we're going through a process with different people. Now, I sometimes get frustrated because we're our heads under the hood. So we know what the science looked like. I know that when I went to Mar Vista High School in San Diego and they switched from a competitive helmet to ours, they went from 17 concussions to 2.
Mm.
That's a marked difference. But how do I communicate that to everyone? Social media, videos, talk to players, face-to-face, trade shows. But you got 2 competitors that are pushing back against you.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have organizations, there's a wide range of them, that they are in litigation mitigation mode. You don't want to say, hey, what we were doing for the last 5 years was potentially wrong, because it opens them up to lawsuits at a later date, unrelated to us, but players coming back at them. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of friction in that space, and navigating it is challenging.
So talk to me about the inside technology. Maybe just talk to me about the technology just overall that is unique. Why is it lighter and why is it more absorbent from concussions?
So it's a great question. I'll use one of these helmets as an example here. So you have a helmet like this. The shell is nylon. Shells in the
Nylon.
past. Yep, they used to be polycarbonate, and our largest competitor still uses polycarbonate, which is plastic. Plastic's got some level of malleability to it, but nylon's much more flexible. And
Like
these vents and
fabric
all that,
type nylon.
it's called nylon 6. Now, our original helmets, we used Kevlar shells, or the Kevlar is DuPont's trade name for their product. We use some different aramid, which is a weave, and it looks like a cloth.
Right.
We codify that into a shell that spreads the impact out.
Got it.
We had great luck with those helmets, and they were very light, but we switched to nylon, 3 years ago. And nylon 6 has got more malleability to it. And it's not only the material, but it's the thickness of the material. And then these vents all play into having flexibility in the areas that are most likely impacted. So styling is important. Keeping a player cool is important. But so you have this nylon shell. And then on the inside of it, we have a 3D printed, it's a variety of geometric shapes. I don't have one sitting in here, but that internal could not be molded. It actually has to be printed. And our NFL helmets, it takes a full day on a 3D printer to print that internal out. And it's a material called TPU. That internal is different for a quarterback helmet, an O-line helmet, and a D-line helmet, based on the impacts and based on how those impacts impact the shell and what happens internally. Then there's a whole series of fitment pads on the inside, and those fitment pads determine the actual, you may have Ernie from Sesame Street and Bert. Head shapes are completely different, but you need that fit, because no matter how good the helmet is, unless the fit is custom, it's not providing the protection it should.
Well, it'll be worse because it'll rattle around on your head.
Exactly. Now at NFL level, our competitors and light, we scan the player's head, and then we're able to, and you probably can't see it on here, but these pads on the inside, all different thicknesses, and you can get an exact fit. Now, our competitors on their lower price helmets, they don't offer that. You get a small, medium, large, extra large. With ours, even at a youth level, you have all those pads that you can adjust to get an exact fit. So if Junior, decides he's going to grow more hair, you can make that adjustment. If his head grows, you can make that adjustment. If you have high schools that buy 200 helmets and player A leaves, he goes off to college, that helmet, if it were customized, well, what am I going to do with it now? It doesn't fit your head, it fit Nick's head. Ours are all interchangeable components that you can take out.
Mm.
Our least expensive helmet, which is designed for youth and high school play, it's called a Apache Tomahawk. It's about $299 up to $350. It has the exact same shell, face mask, and fitment pads as the NFL helmet.
Mm.
The liner is a little different. So we have 3D printed. We have a hybrid of 3D printed with foam pods, and then we actually have just a foam liner. And they're all Virginia Tech 5-star rated, which is the highest category. But obviously, the slightly more expensive helmet, we're able to spend a little bit more money on that 3D internal
Mm-hmm.
to give people better protection. Now, my $299 helmet outperforms my competitor's $750 helmet.
Mm.
My $695 helmet outperforms their $1,000 helmet. So being price competitive in this space is key. The NFL, the pricing doesn't matter.
Right.
But what does matter are the other 7 million players that play football that may not be able to afford a $1,500, $1,300, $700 helmet. This guy is a 5-star helmet. It weighs 2.75 pounds, and it's a 5-star Virginia Tech helmet. This helmet is a $695 helmet. It's number one at Virginia Tech. It weighs a little bit more, but all the pieces and parts are interchangeable. It's like an AR-15 model where you could take a barrel, a lower, a bolt, and mix and match together. And we do that for our inventory purposes of there's one unique component to the variation in the helmets, and that's really it.
Fascinating. It now, let me ask an obvious and stupid question. I mean, there's nothing that's going to totally prevent injury in the game of football, right? Like when Kyle Juszczyk comes through, and if I'm standing there and he pops me in the head, like I'm going to have some amount of like concussive force. Like, what's our goal exactly? Like, what are we attempting to do? Just minimize as many concussions as we possibly can. Elimination, is that like ever in the thought? I mean, talk me through that, or maybe talk me through like what the future could look like in this space.
It's a great question. In a perfect world, we'd love to be able to eliminate concussions. We're not going to be able to do it. Football's a violent game. Players are getting faster. They're getting bigger. They're getting stronger. The field doesn't change size. So you have a lot of these bang bang injuries where I catch the ball and I get hit before I can put myself in a defensive posture. Rules have changed over time. Coaching's changed. Regulations have changed. When you go look at a 90s highlight reel, you could take your head and slam it into somebody's head that was coming across the middle. The NFL's done a great job of being a leader in policing that. The college ranks have followed, and as has high school. You don't need to run an Oklahoma drill with 6-year-olds on the first week of practice. The turf is safer, the helmets are safer, the coaching is better, the identification of injury is better. All of the treatment and the recovery of when somebody can come back. But on the helmet space, we're never going to reduce or eliminate injury. Our goal is to reduce the frequency of concussion and reduce the severity of concussion. Now, and I can say, based on lab testing, that our products are the best at doing that. I can say that based on on-field results that we record, example would be we've got, let's say, 40 to 50 players in the NFL this year, a couple hundred players in NCAA. We haven't had a player miss a game due to head injury in the last 2 years. Now, doesn't mean it hasn't happened. We just don't know about it.
Right.
But in the NFL, the frequency of concussions, you have 1,700 players, somewhere between 7 and 10%, depending on how you calculate.
Yeah.
things.
Also, in like what's reported versus not reported, right?
That's
like,
right. I mean, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
And I'll get myself in trouble with the NFL getting too deep on that.
Well, how could you ever possibly report every single concussion that happens, right? Like you got a special teams guy who goes down, sprints down the field and hits a guy, gets up, he's jacked up, he's fine. But, that's the fourth quarter. He doesn't go back in. He stands on the sidelines. And then when he goes, I'm honestly, I am guessing most of these guys go home with a headache. I have no idea, but I'm guessing a lot of guys go home with a headache after a football game. Probably not if we're in your product, but how could they possibly know that guy has a concussion? And he's not going to go, hey, coach, I shouldn't play next week. He's like on the borderline of still being on the team. Like he's not probably incentivized to really say, like, I have a concussion. I probably shouldn't play these next 2 or 3 weeks. Coach can be like, dude, we got to put you onto the practice squad and pull the practice squad guy up, right?
That's right, right. I mean, you have the beauty of football is it's competitive, and the ugly part of it is it's so competitive that you don't want to raise your hand and say, "Hey, I've got some symptoms here that I got dinged. I want to go back in the game." And I've watched NFL games and college games where I can tell the guy's gotten dinged, or I can tell the guy's,
Yeah.
been out, and he comes back in the game, and that's not my business, and I'm not there on the field, and I'm not a physician. But the NFL's done a good job of bringing in the independent neurologists, and everybody sees the blue tent, and the referee, a teammate, a coach, an opponent, or there's people in the box that are monitoring this, are at least looking for it. Now, do they catch all of them? It's an impossibility.
Yeah.
In college, you don't have that, and it's really up to the player and the trainer. Somebody's not monitoring that, and they don't report concussions in the same way as the NFL does, where there's a finite amount of injury report that's reported, and that the NFL says questionable, or he's out for the week, or it's a game time decision. You don't have that in college. And then at a youth level, there's no way to monitor it,
Right.
because mom who's cutting up the orange slices and dad that's coaching the team, or vice versa, they don't have the tools to do that. Now, I'll say this, it's certainly at a youth level gotten better, where they give cognitive tests, whether it's on a tablet or a phone. They'll test the young person in advance. If they suspect that they've got dinged, they'll have them do the test. They're looking at gait analysis now to be able to identify concussion based on how you would normally walk versus when you're concussed. They're also using gait analysis to determine when somebody's ready to go back to play. But there's protocols for all this. But we'll never be able to eliminate it. And there are companies that put sensors in these, and it fits in ours. Some of our competitors have sensors in the helmet, and the sensors tell you what's happening into the helmet, but not what's happening to the human head.
Right.
Because the helmet's moving differently than the head. It's decoupled to a point. So you'll have a kid that he gets a flashing red and he's fine. Then you'll get a kid that you wouldn't have even thought is dinged and is dinged. There's a mouth guard now with a sensor in it. And, there's some studies that show that provides more accurate information. And those sciences will continue to develop, but that's more recognizing after the fact. We're one of 3 companies that's trying to provide the best preventative equipment to reduce the number of and reduce the severity of. And I can say with confidence that our product's the best in that space. Now, our competitors are innovative as well, and I'm sure we'll see new products from them. But, you look at what's available today, but we're never going to eliminate concussions in hockey, in rodeo, auto racing, motocross, football. And, the United States has got such a full spectrum of sport, right? And you look at a sport right now like rugby that's growing rapidly, or lacrosse that's growing. My son played football. He always wore one of our helmets, never had a concussion, never even had a headache. Played rugby. I'm in the stands, and I'm telling you, I looked down for 2 seconds to grab my water bottle, and I heard the slapping of a pumpkin sound. And my former wife is sitting next to me, and she said, "I think Troy's hurt." And I look up, and there's my 295-pound, 6'2" son sitting up, and his teammate is laid out, mouth breathing. They made a tackle in rugby, their heads hit, and, he got hurt playing rugby. We wouldn't have thought, we knew it was dangerous, but we would have thought for sure he's going to get dinged playing football for several years in Pop Warner, 4 starting years in high school, and, making an attempt at college, and he got dinged in rugby. But the sports are beautiful because we walk in these locker rooms, whether the kid's 6 or he's 26 years old. They learn how to play with other kids. They're playing with kids of other backgrounds, races, religions. Nobody cares when it's 3rd and 12. The level of goal setting, grit, determination, you go through a list of emotional maturity. All of these kids are better after than they were before they play these sports. And there's a lot of great sports. I think football is the best of these sports. And I'm shocked at how great the players are. And with NIL now, we've talked to players that are in high school that have been signing deals for millions of dollars going into college.
Crazy.
College quarterbacks that are making 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 million bucks. And then you got NFL players that are making a boatload of money. I couldn't make a list of people that I've not been impressed with. I mean, I couldn't count 5 bad players that have been rough to deal with on a hand. It's remarkable. So we need the sport. The kids need it. Get out in front of the computer, learn what it's like to win or lose, control your emotions, work with others, but we got to protect them.
I think that's a fantastic place to end it. Nick, thank you so much, man. This was super fun, super informative, and sounds like you got a fantastic business that's got a lot of momentum behind it. So I'm really excited. I'll be looking when I'm watching the NFL for those light helmet, insignias up there.
Well, we got to get your favorite team so we can have one. You can have it in the back. And I will say thank you very much for having me. Companies that are gestating like this, and we talked about entrepreneurship and then we talked about helmets. I'll tell people your biggest, challenge in getting these new companies going is got to have goals, break them down to manageable steps, but you have to be durable. Listen to other people, but trust your heart and keep chipping away. But people like yourself that are having these great podcasts that expose things, they motivate people. They give other people that are in the process of it gosh, that guy went through the same thing. And all of us that are doing these companies, we're having bad days just like you are. And you now taking over your company, partners off on his way, you're going to have rough days too. You're not the only one. We're in this together. Surround yourself with other entrepreneurs and keep going. Don't quit. We're all proud to be the man in the arena when we're running these things. So thanks for having me today.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say is if and when something gets hard, it's a helpful reframe to go, oh, this is good because nobody else is like willing to do these things, right? And that's kind of the idea of like, this problem's so hard. And like the smart entrepreneurs will be like, awesome, that's great because nobody else is going to be able to solve this problem. Like we're going to go out and do it. And I've been in businesses where it's like a low barrier to entry, and those are the worst businesses because there's just so much competition. There's no margin to be made. Everybody's doing it, and you're like, God, I wish that this business was harder to get into. So trust me, whenever the going gets tough, you got to count your blessings. So
I will say my most motivating moment was sitting in my ex-wife's kitchen eating a hamburger that she made me when I went to pick up the kids, and I was having a bad day. I had my head in my hands. And I'm like, why is this happening, to me right now? Why is this happening to us? And she just looked at me over the top of her glasses and said, because you're the only one that can do it. And that is what got me. I said, man, it's not why, it's what's next. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do next to attack this thing? And that's what you have to and you hit it on the head too when you said, hey, this problem popped up. Good, because now I can address it, fix it, and move on to the next thing. The problem came to you. You couldn't procrastinate and do the hard thing last. So welcome those things, attack them, and blast through them.
Awesome. Nick, thank you so much. We'll attach all the links if you're a football player and you want to check out the tech or buy the helmets.
You bet. Thanks so much.
Thank you, man. Talk soon.